Working at a gas station for the last 2 years, I've seen all kinds of people come through. Some were just passing by filling up their tanks before they disappeared down the highway, others regulars who stopped in often enough that I got to know their stories, but most were strangers gone as quickly as they came. My shift usually ran from 400 p.m. to midnight, and while it could be boring, it wasn't exactly scary. That changed one Saturday night. The station was mostly empty. It was just after 10 p.m. and I was finishing up some cleaning inside the convenience store. The night was cool with a light fog beginning to settle over the empty road. Then I heard the distinct sound of a car pulling up to one of the pumps. I looked out through the glass window and saw an old beat-up sedan rolling in the car. Looked like it hadn't been taken care of in years. Rust patches covered most of the body, and the headlights flickered like they could go out at any second. The driver was a man, probably in his late 40s or early 50s, with a rough beard and dirty clothes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were sunken and dark, and his skin had an oily sheen under the dim lights of the station. There was something about him that immediately made my stomach twist. It wasn't that he looked angry or dangerous exactly, just off. He parked his car at pump number 3 and sat there for a moment. I watched him through the window, waiting for him to get out and start pumping gas, but he didn't move. He just stared forward, hands on the steering wheel, his eyes wide and unfocused. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to stay inside the store and wait until he left, but something in my gut told me to go out and see if he needed help. Maybe his car had broken down, maybe he was lost, or maybe I was just overthinking things. As usual, I stepped out of the store, the cool night air hitting my face, and walked over to his car. His eyes snapped toward me as I approached, and for a second I thought I saw something, almost like fear, flash across his face. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. Need any help? I asked, keeping my distance. He shook his head, not saying a word, and looked away quickly. I didn't like it. His behavior was strange, but I didn't want to push. I turned to head back inside, but as I did, something caught my eye. In the back seat of his car, partially hidden under a dirty black cloth, was a hand, a small hand. At first I thought it was a mannequin or some sort of prop, but something about it looked too real. It was pale, with tiny fingers curled loosely like a child's hand. My heart skipped a beat. I took a deep breath and turned back to the man. "Is that your kid in the back?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though I could feel the fear creeping into my voice. The man's face changed instantly. His eyes hardened, and he glared at me with such intensity that I felt frozen to the spot. "Mind your business," he said, his voice low and dangerous. I wanted to walk away, pretend I hadn't seen anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. Should I confront him, call the police? What if I was overreacting? I nodded slowly and stepped back, pretending to head back inside. "All right," I muttered, though I'm not sure he even heard me. But instead of going back to the store, I circled behind his car, keeping out of his line of sight. I needed to stall him and keep him there long enough for help to arrive. I couldn't just let him drive off with that child, if it even was a child. I walked back toward the front of the store, calling out over my shoulder, "Hey, I think something's wrong with the pump. It might take a few minutes to get it working." He didn't respond. He just kept staring forward, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. Once I was inside, I grabbed the phone and dialed the local police. My hands were shaking as I explained the situation to the dispatcher, trying to sound calm but feeling the panic building. in my chest. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled into the station, their lights flashing but their sirens off. As soon as the man saw them, he bolted from his car and sprinted toward the woods behind the station. One of the officers chased after him while the other went to check the car. I watched through the window as they pulled the cloth off the back seat. My stomach turned when I saw the boy. He was unconscious, pale but alive. The officer quickly called for an ambulance. Meanwhile, the man hadn't gotten far. The officer tackled him to the ground at the edge of the woods and cuffed him. They dragged him back to the station, his face twisted in anger, but he said nothing. The next few days were a blur of police reports and interviews. The officers told me that the boy had been kidnapped from a mall a few days earlier. His family had been frantically searching for him, and I couldn't shake the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't noticed that hand in the back seat. A few days later, the police thanked me, saying I'd probably saved the boy's life. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the image of the man's face, the coldness in his eyes when he told me to mind my business. It was a quiet Tuesday evening at the gas station where I worked. The sun had just set and the sky was turning dark. I was behind the counter counting change and waiting for the next customer. The neon lights buzzed above me and the air smelled of gasoline and convenience store snacks. It was just another ordinary night, or so I thought. The door creaked open. A man walked in. He looked rough, messy hair, dirty clothes, and eyes that darted around the store like a trapped animal. I could tell he was under the influence of something. His movements were jerky and he seemed agitated. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach, but I tried to stay calm and professional. Evening, I said, forcing a smile. Can I help you with something? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he wandered down one of the aisles, picking up items and putting them back down. He was acting strange and I kept a close eye on him. After a few minutes, he made his way to the counter holding a can of soda. I rang up his purchase. "That'll be $150, I said. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out some crumpled bills. As he handed me the money, I noticed something shiny in his other hand. It was a small pocket knife. My heart skipped a beat. I tried not to show my fear, but it was hard. His eyes met mine and I could see a storm of emotions swirling in them. He placed the knife on the counter and for a moment we just stood there in silence. My mind raced with possibilities. What was he planning to do? Was he going to rob the store? Hurt me. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Then he spoke. His voice was shaky and filled with a strange mix of desperation and regret. "I was going to do something terrible," he said, "but I changed my mind." I didn't know what to say. I glanced at the knife, then back at him. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head. "No, I'm not." He pushed the knife toward me. "Take it. I don't want it anymore." I hesitated, but then slowly reached out and took the knife. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. My mind was still reeling from his words. What had he planned to do? Why did he change his mind? He took a step back, running his hands through his hair. "You need to stay vigilant," he said, his voice breaking. "There are bad people out there, really bad people. I was almost one of them tonight." I didn't know how to respond. I felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that he wasn't going to hurt me, but fear because I didn't understand what had just happened. "Do you need help?" I asked. "I can call someone for you." He shook his head again, more violently this time. No, I just need to go. I need to get out of here." He turned and headed for the door, but before he left he looked back at me one last time. "Remember what I said, stay vigilant." And then he was gone, disappearing into the night. The door swung shut behind him and I was left standing there holding the knife and trying to process what had just happened. My hands were trembling and my heart was racing. I locked the door and called my boss. I told him Everything that had happened, he said he would come by right away and that I should stay inside until he got there. As I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease the man's words echoed in my mind. Stay vigilant. When my boss arrived, he took the knife from me and called the police. They came and took my statement, promising to keep an eye out for the man. But even after they left, I couldn't calm down. I kept replaying the encounter in my head, wondering what he had meant by something terrible and why he had changed his mind. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting the man to come back or someone else to walk in with bad intentions. The gas station, usually a place of routine and familiarity, now felt ominous and threatening. When my shift finally ended, I drove home in silence. The streets were dark and empty, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. I kept thinking about the man's parting words. I didn't know if I would ever see him again, but his warning had left a lasting impact. That night, I locked all my doors and windows and double-checked them before going to bed. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and listening for any unusual sounds. The man's haunted eyes and desperate voice kept repeating in my mind. It was a night I would never forget, a night that changed the way I saw the world. This is something that happened when I was staying in a hotel a few years ago. I was on a trip with my best friend Emily, and this was on the second night that we were there. We were staying a little ways outside of the city because it was cheaper. The area where we were staying seemed pretty nice, though late at night we were going to go to the gas station to get some snacks, but Emily's boyfriend called her on the phone, and they started talking for a while, so I went on my own. The area around the hotel was basically a couple of other businesses that were now closed. Then there was a gas station that was open. I left the hotel and went down the sidewalk to walk there. It took me maybe 5 minutes and nobody else was outside. When I got into the gas station, there was actually a lot of people in there, probably about 10, and the store was a little bit larger than most. There was a huge selection of snacks and drinks, and I was inside for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I picked out a number of items and then checked out and left. When I was inside of the store, I didn't really notice anything strange happening or anybody seeming suspicious. I do recall, though, right after I left, I heard the door open and somebody leaving behind me. I didn't think much of it, obviously, but when I left the parking lot and was back on the sidewalk, the person followed. I sort of looked behind me and saw that there was a man walking a ways back. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt and a winter hat. He followed me on the sidewalk, and we both walked back in the direction of the hotel. This road that I was walking alongside was kind of a back road and very quiet. There wasn't really a big reason to walk down it right now other than to probably go back to the hotel. So when the man continued to walk behind me, I hoped that he was also staying at the hotel. I couldn't help but feel a little bit nervous, though soon I made it all the way back to the hotel parking lot. The man was the same distance behind me, and still there I walked into the lobby of the hotel, and the man followed me, and then I walked to the stairs because I didn't want to be in the elevator with the guy. I figured that if he really did stay here, then he would take the elevator like most people, but no, he followed me to the stairs. After I got into the stairwell, I let the door close. Within a second after it shut, I heard it opening. I knew the man was going to follow me up. I walked up the stairs to where our room was on the 3rd floor. When I was walking up the stairs, I texted Emily to come to the room door and open it. Luckily, she saw my text within seconds and said that she would. I got to our floor and once again closed the door to the stairwell behind me. I was about 20 foot down the hallway when I heard it opening. I couldn't believe that the man was still following me. Our room was a ways down, so I kept walking, but I walked much faster now. I could hear the footsteps behind me approaching fast, and he was gaining on me, but I didn't look behind. Soon I saw Our door opened slightly because Emily was holding it at that point. I walked even faster and got to the door. I quickly went inside and slammed the door shut behind me. It automatically locked, but I put the other old-fashioned lock on it as well. I then looked through the peephole and saw the man walk right up to the door. Then he kind of walked away slowly, only to return a few seconds later. When he did, he knocked on the door. I certainly was not going to answer it. I moved away from the door. Emily didn't really know what was going on and was very confused. The man knocked on the door one more time about a minute later, then finally he walked away. I told Emily the story of what happened. I'm really glad that she was able to hold the door open for me. If not, I would have had to unlock the door myself with the key, which would have probably slowed me down 5 to 10 seconds. At least the man may have been able to close in on me. I don't know who the guy was or why he followed me, but I really don't think he was actually staying in our hotel.